So I wanted to talk to you about doing a MAF test today, and I think it's really important to understand how to be successful at this so you can see the results over time and how you're improving. Can you do a video explaining the MAF test? I have read it a ton of times, but I still don't understand it, especially when a 5K is really hard for me to complete. How would you do a MAF test if you were me? 5 miles would be too long. Certainly I can explain the MAF test and provide guidance on how you could tailor it towards your fitness level. First, the MAF test is a method of determining your maximum aerobic function, aka maximum aerobic heart rate, by measuring your aerobic efficiency. To perform the test, you're going to need to run a steady pace while keeping your heart rate below a particular threshold. But first, let's understand what the heck maximum aerobic function actually really means to the average person. Maximum aerobic function, MAF, is a term coined by Dr. Phil Maffetone, and it's describing the highest level of aerobic heart rate that an individual can achieve while burning fat as a primary fuel source. MAF is often used in endurance sports, training, particularly in running, cycling, to determine an athlete's optimal aerobic training zone, according to Dr. Phil Maffetone. So how did he come up with the number 180 minus your age? Well, Dr. Phil Maffetone came up with the 180 formula by analyzing heart rate data from hundreds of his clients over the many years of coaching. He found that subtracting an individual's age from 180 provided a good starting point to determine the maximum aerobic heart rate and optimizing their aerobic training based on that. I'd also like to mention that from my understanding, his clients had been running for quite some time and their ages ranged from 20 to the 40s, some in the 50s. But for runners in the 60s, he really didn't have a lot of runners in that age group. So you kind of have to play with the number a little bit, according to Dr. Phil Maffetone, to kind of figure out a little bit of trial and error, so to speak. He chose 180 because it was a simple formula that could be applied to almost everybody, just like the 220 minus your age to find one's maximum heart rate, regardless of their fitness or age. The goal of the 180 formula was to help an individual train at or below their maximum aerobic heart rate, which is the highest heart rate that they could sustain while primarily burning fat as a fuel source. It was thought to improve aerobic fitness, enhance endurance, and reduce the risk of injury and overtraining. However, it's important to note that the 180 formula is a general guideline. There are many individual factors that can affect an individual's maximum aerobic heart rate, including genetics, health status, fitness level, stress, temperature, food, just to name a few. But you get my point, right? So it's important to adjust the formula based on an individual's needs. To be fair, there are other ways to train using heart rate, and I've talked about that in a few of them in my older videos. So if you're not happy with the MAF method or you want to try something else, have a look at those videos below. I'm sure they would probably help you out a lot. So here are some expectations when you're training using the MAF method. Training at or below the MAF level is believed to improve an individual's aerobic fitness, increase their fat burning capabilities, and reduce the risk of injury and overtraining. Look, this type of training is often referred to as aerobic-based training and is the foundation component of many endurance sport training programs. During my time using the MAF method, I found that it was necessary to take a period of 3 to 6 months to specifically develop my aerobic system and then evaluate and see how I am progressing. You don't want to continue training fully at MAF, as eventually you'll hit a wall and you're not going to progress anymore. When using the Maffetone method, there are only 2 things that you need to look at during your run: how long your run is and what is your heart rate at. No need to look at the pace or distance, as these mean nothing during this type of training. The reason is that if you're out for a run for 60 minutes each day in your MAF zone, at the end of the 3 to 6 month building block, you should be running more distance with a faster pace at the same heart rate. The amount you need to train will differ from each runner. However, I found that running between 8 to 10 hours per week really worked for me. Now, it may work differently for somebody else. Now, your heart rate is an accurate indicator of intensity. Lower heart rate exercises tend to be aerobic, while performing the same workout with a higher heart rate would be anaerobic. This does not mean that you will always be slow. Building the aerobic system allows the body to move faster over time. A runner, for example, will get faster over time at the same heart rate and level of effort. Figure out how many days you are going to be running per week and for how long. Here are some examples for you to work with. Example A, 4 days running for 45 minutes and 3 days walking for 45 minutes. Example B, 5 days running, 60 minutes, 2 days walking for 45 minutes. Example C, 4 days running at 60 minutes, 1 day running at 90 minutes, and 1 day walking at 45. Example D, 3 days running at 60 minutes, 2 days running at 90 minutes, 2 days walking at 45 minutes. Or example E, 2 days running at 60 minutes, 3 days running at 90 minutes, 1 day running at 120 minutes, and 1 day walking at 45 minutes. Your MAF number is typically calculated subtracting your age from 180 and adjusting for relative factors such as injuries, chronic illness, or recent surgeries. For example, if you are 40 years old and have no relative health issues, your maximum aerobic heart rate would be 180 minus 40, which would be 140 beats a minute. So for your weekly runs, you will want to keep your heart rate at or below your MAF number. You can keep it in your MAF zone, 140 to 130 beats per minute. So the age-old question still remains. How much should I run when starting out? And the answer, sadly, depends. So here are some questions you can ask yourself to figure out how will you apply the MAF method to your training. The first step is setting a baseline. So what I would recommend is you find either a track or an area that you're going to run every single month. You have at least 5 kilometers, maybe 4, maybe 3, just depending on where you are in your fitness. But try to get that MAF test done. And if you have to walk it, you got to walk it. Make sure, obviously, you got your watch going and stay in your MAF zone. Do that route. Now you've set a baseline. So that's your beginning. Now, after running for a month, then you're going to want to do another MAF test. And you'll need to run at a steady pace while keeping your heart rate below your MAF number or right at your number. It's better if you're right at your number. This can be challenging, and you'll need to find a pace that keeps your heart rate in check while you're also pushing your aerobic capacity. Typically, the test is performed over a distance of 3 miles or 5 kilometers or 6 miles or 10 kilometers. But this can be adjusted based on your fitness level. If 5K is too challenging for you, then you can start with a shorter distance and gradually increase it as your fitness improves. During the test, it's going to be important to maintain a steady pace and avoid sprinting or stopping. Walking is okay if you need to keep your heart rate in your MAF zone. If your heart rate exceeds your maximum aerobic heart rate, slow down until it falls below the threshold. But again, you want to kind of keep it at your MAF number, the max number. So after completing the test, stop your watch. And then you can use this data to monitor your time and adjust your training program accordingly. You can write this in a spreadsheet that I have attached in the description down below. That's what I use, and it's very helpful. Some considerations before starting your tests. Make sure you are hydrated. It's important, but I have to say it. Set your watch to alert you if you go above or below your MAF zone. And each watch you can set this up. Do your best to stay in that MAF zone during that test though, if you can't keep it exactly at your MAF number. Consistency with your training, focusing on breathing, monitoring your heart rate regularly, and being patient are also important for improving your aerobic fitness and seeing progress in your MAF test results over time. Without objective measures, it's easy to fool yourself into thinking all is well with your training. The MAF test tells you you are headed in the wrong direction or you're headed in the right direction. Either too much anaerobic exercise or too little aerobic exercise, or any imbalances that may adversely affect your aerobic system. Stress, poor diet are just 2 examples of that. There's a great benefit of doing a MAF test, and that's the ability objectively to inform you if there's any obstacles long before you feel bad or get injured. Your training will progress much smoothly, quickly, by regularly performing the MAF test. So this is what an actual example of a MAF test performed by walking on a track at a heart rate of 145, calculated in time, minutes per mile. So mile 1, 1632, mile 2, 1646, mile 3, 1709. This is the way it should look. During any MAF test, your times should always get slower with successive repetition. The first mile should always be the fastest, and the last should always be the slowest. If that's not the case, it usually means that you haven't warmed up enough. Or if you're running not on a track and you're running up a little bit of hills in some places, that's where you may see that number kind of go up and then down. The MAF test should indicate faster times as the months go by. This means your aerobic system is developing and you're burning more fat, enabling you to do more work even if you walk or run longer distances. Your MAF test should show the same progression of results, providing you heed the maximum aerobic heart rate. I'm going to show you another example showing the improvement of the same person that we just mentioned. So in this example, you can see this particular person saw improvement over a period of time and months. Now you'll want to perform the MAF test regularly throughout the year and chart your results. And I recommend doing the test every month. Testing yourselves too often may result in obsession. Trust me, I've been there. You won't improve significantly within 1 week. It's going to take a little bit of time. The point of the MAF test is to help you chart your progress and to know when your aerobic systems are getting off course. Performing the test irregularly or not often enough, it kind of defeats the purpose. To perform the MAF test, you want to follow these steps. First, warm up. Begin with a 10 to 15 minute easy warm up, including some dynamic stretching. A proper warm up is important to prepare your body for exercise by increasing your heart rate and your blood flow to the muscles. This can help prevent injury and improve your performance during the MAF test. So you want to make sure that you're running in your MAF zone and you've set up your watch correctly. Remember, you're trying to train your body to burn fat as a fuel source more efficiently and build the endurance. Now, you want to choose a distance. Like I mentioned before, deciding on a distance, that can be challenging, but it can be doable. So you may want to pick a 3 to 5 kilometers or a 1.8 to 3 miles, and you can perform the test on a track or on a measured course, or you can choose a distance by selecting an area that you typically run at, but make sure that you are running at a consistent pace and maintain your heart rate within your MAF range. Run at a steady pace, start running comfortable pace, and gradually increase the speed until you are running in the fastest pace you can sustain while keeping your heart rate below your maximum aerobic heart rate. Run at a steady pace. Running at a steady pace during the MAF test helps you maintain consistent heart rate and improve aerobic efficiency, gradually increasing your speed until you're running at the fastest pace you can sustain while keeping your heart rate at or below without pushing yourself and going into the anaerobic territory, which can cause fatigue and decrease your aerobic fitness while you're doing these MAF runs. Monitor your heart rate throughout the test. It's important. Your heart rate regularly is going to be moving up and down, and it could be all over the place. So make sure that you are going down this road. And yes, it's going to suck, but you just want to make sure that you're staying at that particular MAF number and it doesn't go above or it doesn't go below that zone. But try to keep it at the maximum number. Now, after the test, again, you want to make sure that you're cooling down. 5 to 10 minutes, just an easy jog. In some cases, you may have to just walk, but that's just the nature of it. Consistency with your training, focusing on your breathing, monitoring your heart rate regularly, and being patient are also super important for improving your aerobic fitness and seeing progress in your MAF test results over time. By following these guidelines, you can successfully perform the MAF test and improve your aerobic fitness. How often should you perform a MAF test? The frequency of performing the MAF test depends on your fitness level and training goals. Generally, if you are just starting out with the MAF training method, you can perform the test once a month to track your progress. As you improve, you can perform the tests less frequently, such as every 3 to 6 months. The goal of the MAF test is to track your progress and adjust your training program accordingly. So it's important to perform this regularly, but not too often. Don't get obsessed. To ensure a successful MAF test, here are some tips you can follow. Be consistent with your training. To improve your aerobic fitness and performance, it's important to be consistent with your training program. Aim for 3 to 4 times per week and gradually increase your mileage and intensity over time. Number 2, focus on your breathing. During the MAF test, focus on breathing deeply, rhythmically, and this can help maintain a steady heart rate and improve your aerobic efficiency. Breathing through the nose can be very helpful. Monitor your heart rate regularly. Check your heart rate every few minutes during the test to ensure you are staying within your MAF zone. If your heart rate exceeds the threshold, slow down and walk until it falls below the target range. Be patient, and I can't make this any more important. Improving your aerobic fitness takes time and consistency. Don't be discouraged if you don't see immediate improvements, and trust the process of the MAF training. It does work. It just takes a little bit of time and leaving the ego at the door. What happens if you don't improve? If you're not seeing improvements in your MAF test results over time, it may be an indication that you may need to adjust your training program. And here are some things to consider if you're not seeing progress. Are you consistent with your training? If you're not running regularly or sticking to a training program, it may be difficult to see improvements in your aerobic fitness. 2, are you pushing yourself enough? To improve your aerobic capacity, you need to challenge yourself by running at a steady pace that is close or at your MAF number. If you're running too slow or taking too many breaks, you may not be pushing yourself enough. This can happen if you have to stop at a traffic light and wait for it to change because it's red. So you're resting. So you want to find an area that you can be continuously moving. Number 3, are you recovering adequately? Recovery is important to me for improving your aerobic fitness. So if you're running too much, you may be putting too much stress on your body, not staying within your MAF range, doing too much anaerobic training, or you may be too stressed out at work. You may not have the time to do this. You may not be eating that well. There's a lot of things. But if you're not seeing improvement in your MAF test, the results, it may be helpful to reassess where you're at and make adjustments as needed. I know that caffeine and fast food and stress and lack of sleep, the wind, the heat, the cold, the weather can all potentially affect your MAF results. Caffeine can raise your heart rate, making it more difficult to stay within your range. Stress at work or family, lack of sleep can also elevate your heart rate and make it more difficult to stay within your MAF range. Wind and temperature can affect your perceived effort and may make it more difficult to maintain a consistent heart rate. So it's important to take these factors into consideration. To get the most accurate results from the MAF test, it's recommended to perform the test in a similar environment. Conditions each time that can be repetitive over time. The weather, whether it be on a 400-meter track or on a constant route. Additionally, it's important to avoid any factors that could artificially elevate your heart rate or otherwise impact your performance, such as caffeine or a high-fat meal before the test. Controlling these variables can also ensure that your MAF test results are accurately reflected in your anaerobic level, and you could track your progress over time. Running on a route with small hills during the MAF test can help you improve your aerobic fitness and endurance by training your body to adjust to the changes in the elevation and maintain a consistent heart rate. However, it is important to note that running on hills can also be more challenging, and you may have to adjust your pace. Stay within your MAF zone. Also important to keep in mind that the MAF test is indeed to be a low-intensity aerobic test. So if the hills are too steep and it makes it difficult to maintain a consistent heart rate, it may be best to choose a flatter route. But either way, you'll have to figure that out. You want to be able to get the most out of your training. So if you'd like to know more, click this video and it'll walk you through some more of those processes.